So first start is on Git, and we have the Blender organization, and in there is Blender manual. The manual is stored in Subversion, which is like a versioning system that is not supported by Git. It was supported by Fabricator, the old software we used, but it's not in Git. There are people working on converting the manual to Git instead, and that is going to be a lot more pleasant to work with, but it's also going to take a little bit. So we can just dive into this and then look at how things changed over time later. This is basically the gist of it. Patches can be submitted as diff file in a task for now until the documentation project has migrated to Git. So first way to edit the documentation is to just tell somebody, hey, look, there's this web page with this text and it should be that text. Then already you have written some text and improved things, and then you leave it to somebody else to actually put that into the manual. But it might also be the simplest way. If anybody wants to expand something or correct something, you don't know how to do it, you don't have the time to do it, then that is already an improvement. Let's go look at the technical side of things. So what we have here is my checkout of the thing. So what you need first is to have Subversion client, and you need to have Python installed, Python 3. And then go to the documentation. I'm on Linux. It will tell you exactly how to install everything that is necessary, and also on Windows and on Mac OS. And then this is the magic command that you have to give. So you do svn checkout and then that URL. And that will give you these files. Now you can see that there is a requirements.txt file in there, and that is what contains all the Python packages that need to be installed with the right version. So you can just give a tool this file and it will know what to do. If you want to go simple, you just do pip3 install -- user -r requirements.txt. This will install these packages in your user directory and will make it available with your Python wherever you are. Personally, I'm not that much of a fan because it can interfere with other projects that also use Python, but maybe slightly different versions of these packages. So I like to keep that separated out. Doing this does add a few more commands to this mix. It becomes a little bit more complex, but I'm going to show it anyway. This is called a virtual environment. So you can do Python 3 -m venv. That's the module that creates virtual environments. And then you give it a directory name. Typical is either .venv if you want to hide it by default, or just venv if you want to show it. And this will create a new virtual environment for me in which I can install stuff.
To be clear, the last parameter, last argument, venv, is just the name of your virtual environment, so you could change that.
You can just do that as well. Now you need to activate it, which is the magical command, at least here on my shell. Then for this demo, bin activate.fish, because I'm using a fish shell, which is slightly different than other shells. Usually it is just this guy. And now you can see here in front of my prompt that it says the name of the virtual env, which is an indicator that this guy is active. Now I can do that same command, except slightly simpler. Just pip install, because it knows it's in this virtual environment, so it will just install it in there. And then it downloads stuff and installs stuff. And this was basically the difficult part of how to set things up. If you get through this, then things are simpler. If you open that directory in Visual Studio Code or in another editor of your choice, then you see the manual directory, and that has all these subdirectories like animation and armature and bones, and there have documentation of bendy bones. And this is restructured text. It's the markup language that is used for the manual. It's been designed for like writing book-like documentation, and has a lot of things like references and different ways of displaying things. Like here you have a reference to some label, and then anywhere else in any other file, this label can be defined, and then it will create a link to wherever that thing is. There's also some multi-line markup like dot dot space note colon colon, and then the next block you indent, and that becomes a note in the manual. These are header markings. If it is above and below, that's highest level. If you use a different style, that becomes the sub-level. If then you do yet another style, like maybe a subheader with single dashes, then it understands, oh, this different style must be a subheader. And this is regular text. So now let's build the manual, which takes all this text and converts it to HTML.
Hey, Sybren, I know with standard markup, there's a way of kind of doing a preview of what documentation is going to look like. Is there something like that for Visual Studio Code?
I don't know if there is, because like Markdown by itself is fairly limited in what it can do. Mm-hmm. And restructured text is really made to expand with different kind of constructs and tags for specific purposes. So Sphinx, the documentation tool that we have, adds a lot on top of what is regular restructured text. But this is the closest thing you can get. You tell it make live HTML, and then it starts building stuff. And first time you do this takes a while. But in the end, once this is done, it will open the browser for me in a way that automatically reloads the pages. You're in animation, armature, bones, animation, armatures, bones, properties, I think. Bendy bones. There we go. And there we have a subhead with regular text. It should automatically update. There we go. Including a typo right under the mouse cursor.
Cool. At least you can, once you set that up, then you can see it live and tweak it. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And like there are more complex constructs as well, like a list table, which is, I guess, these figures. Usually I just look at where something interesting is happening and then I copy paste and adjust. I will give a demo, like I will show what these references look like. So here we have a in figure reference something, and that is actually here. So the dot dot and then this colon, that means this is a reference for whatever is following it, and thus this will just reference this figure. And that gets the name, you click on it, it leads you to it. But it could have been on a completely different page as well. That's a nice thing, which means that you can just take a long page, cut it up into smaller bits, and then all the links will just keep working. Also, you can see these kind of references, BPY, types, edit bone, dot, use scale easing. And these are actually used by Blender. Let's see if I can get it to work. If we have an armature and we are in edit mode and then bendy bones, scale easing, right click, online manual, then that brings you to exactly that thing. And this is how things in the user interface are linked to the manual, because these are just in Python where that particular property is defined.
Does that have to be at a specific point, or like it?
No,
it's right above it, so it's just that comes first and then the text, so that it links you to the correct place. Okay.
Exactly. So then we have getting the manual, building the manual, editing the manual, and then it's a matter of getting your changes submitted. And because we don't have Git available to us, what you do is svn diff, and that will give you exactly what changed, in which file, from which revision to which revision, all the lines that were added and removed. And what you can do is arrow that into my first change.diff, and now it is stored in a file instead of shown. And that guy's here. Now I should be able, user manual, issues, new issue. It's not a bug report, so let's just do default demo change. And from our file browser, I should be able to just plunk it in somewhere. There we go. And then you have the diff attached to a place where you can type what you've done, what it is about. Maybe tag it with a label, click on create issue, which I won't do now. And then you have your manual change submitted for review. As far as I understand, that's nowadays the workflow.
And as
How
soon
does
as
it-
it switches to Git, we just make pull requests as well, or
Then we can just make a branch and commit locally and pull requests in the whole workflow like that.
How does that work for images or like other stuff for the manual? Like for the diff makes sense, but what happens to the images if you added them into the interface?
You just attach them, I think, to the
Same thing.
to the issue.
Okay.
Yeah. And in the manual, there is one directory called images. And that has all the images of the entire manual just sitting there in one big directory.
Okay.
So that's also fairly easy because it just, like, you attach them and they go into one place and they're all linked from one place. So it's nice and brainless.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I've seen the manual GIFs too. Do we try to shy away from that, or are those acceptable?
No, like GIF is 256 colors only at max. Low frame rate, bad compression ratios. Video files are better, but I think especially for the manual, it's important to have the text really explain what's going on, because that is also searchable, and video only as just supplementary material.